And I'm trying to think back to when I first started, and because I know that was a big, exercise we were doing about reaching out to your sphere. And I want to say it's probably because you have a bit of maybe, let's say, imposter syndrome in the beginning, where you're like, like you said, you wrote a few exams, got a website, and now you're a real estate agent, right? But you haven't actually done real estate.
Yeah. I also think it's because like there's so many realtors out there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like these people definitely get pitched like that message we all see on LinkedIn, right? Like, I got my real estate license now. And, do you need any help? Like, right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people might not want to feel confident to compete against other agents. You know what I mean? They're like, I just started, I'm fresh. Why would they choose me over, someone else? I think that's like a very big barrier, huge mindset, which is probably, I would say, like a big part of why people succeed in general in life. But especially in real estate in those first few years, it's going to be that mindset aspect. But yeah, for myself, I'd probably say, maybe a little bit of mindset that took a little bit of time to shift. And I would say that shift took time with confidence, being in the industry, being, having great mentors, being on a team, for example, that kind of gives you that confidence to reach out to, strangers and your SOI and say, I am competent to help you, with this next step that you're trying to take.
Welcome to the Beyond the Sale podcast. I'm Cynthia Ostos, a real estate broker and team leader at Revel Realty in Mississauga. My goal with this show is to provide you with insights, tactics, and strategies to go beyond the sale. I'm here today with my guest, Dakwan Henry. Dakwan is one of our amazing team members here on the team, and you've been with us 3 years now.
Yeah, I have. I can't believe it's been 3 years already. And honestly, I'm excited to be on this podcast. I know we've chatted about it for a bit, and to see it all come together is amazing. But yeah, no, it's been a solid 3 years. And I feel like we just keep doing a bunch of new stuff all the time at this point.
I know, it's incredible. I've wanted to do this for a long time.
Yes.
But obviously life gets in the way. We had COVID, all kinds of stuff. I had 2 babies, and here we are all these years later.
I know. I'm almost shocked, when we're filming this, it's already near the ending of 2023. I feel like for everyone, even the last few years have just been a blur. I don't know how you've felt over the last 3 years with everything going on.
Definitely a blur, for sure. And a lot going on all the time.
I feel like there's been so much things going on with the real estate world, economy, just everyone in general. And I feel like that kind of segues into the topic that we're going to talk about really well about, why people succeed and don't succeed in real estate. And I think that it's been very common, leading up to the end of this year.
Yes. So today's episode is all about why so many agents that get licensed don't make it in this real estate business. Why is real estate so damn hard? Yeah. Right. So actually, it's interesting, like we're saying about COVID. During COVID, I found there was a lot of people that decided to get their real estate license. Right. Obviously, I think the shows like Selling Sunset. What other shows are there besides? That's the only one I really watch.
Yeah, there's so many shows on Netflix of Selling Dallas, Selling Sunset, all those types of things. And I couldn't agree more that a big reason of why people decided to get into the real estate world was because of all, let's say, the influence or the lavish lifestyle, or honestly, the ease. I think that TV shows really well of the job really sold people on all of those things. So I think we saw a huge influx of people wanting to get their license, become agents and almost live that lifestyle that they're being sold to. But this year, I think it's been very clear that that's really not the reality of that situation.
Truthfully, the barriers to entry to get into real estate, they are quite low, right?
You think so? Yeah. You feel so? Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much, I think, only need to have is it high school or?
Oh, it's so funny you say that, the education background
wise,
to hop
right?
into it. Yeah.
You don't need to have a master's, right? You pretty much, I think, only need high school. And then now I think it's all online. Right? Mm-hmm. Obviously very different from when I got licensed. It was all in person.
Right. Yeah.
There were textbooks, there were teachers, things have definitely changed. Mm-hmm. You're, someone that got licensed online, I believe, right?
Recently, I feel like we're dating ourselves a little bit, but,
we are.
I hear about these things all the time where, a lot of the industry, even the training to get licensed was all in person. It was very, very different, where now a lot of the things are just done online. And honestly, I can't imagine life or working without DocuSign or Authentisign or even the internet in general and things like that. But it's funny you say the barrier to entries are, low. And I think for people like us, we would agree, with our background of going to University of Toronto, being, having a background in education, we see that. But a lot of people who I speak to who want to get their license, they actually have told me they feel like the barrier is very high on the costs of it.
Oh, I see what it actually costs to get
You know
licensed.
what I mean?
I mean, I think it's also, everyone's mindset around money is so different. But
Agree.
I mean, I think it's like $5,000 to do your courses. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This ties, I would say, to the failures of why people don't make it in real estate. But yeah, no, I think some of the barriers that people are facing are the schooling. You need to go through the education because they were with Aurea before,
yes, and then
now
they
moved to Humber, right? Yeah, and now it's all online, which, for time's sake wise, I think people can still like work a 9 to 5 or work a different job and still get their licensing. It might take a little longer, but it's possible to do. But you got to pay for the schooling with that aspect. And then after that is completed, which I think is a few $1,000s now. Like I want to say it's like 4 to 5. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that, anyone who's watching or listening. But I think it's around there. And then on top of that, after you get your actual license, then you have all your board fees, your insurances, all those types of items. And it really, really adds up. And that doesn't even add to all the expenses, our team has, like all the bonus things. Like this is just to get in there. I feel like it might be high depending on the individual looking.
But I also think like if you look at any industry, it's sort of like, an industry where you can become licensed and not have a lot of overhead other than the things that you just mentioned. So in that sense, I also think that's why people are kind of like, okay, like it's not like you have to buy like a franchise and pay like a set amount, like $400,000.
Yeah.
And then like open your own business, right? Like you can sort of just get your license, pay all of that, of course, and then get out there and start making money, right? Like, so people just
like
think,
that, super easy, right?
Like that. People think, it's so easy, right? So, okay, I'll do that. And then I don't really have to like spend much else other than people will say, of course, like business cards, which really not many people use these anymore, but get a website and you're up and running. There you go, right?
And the cash is just flooding in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Next thing you know, you're driving a Ferrari. But we all know that's not the case. 85% of realtors don't make it past year 5, let alone year 2. But you've made it, Dakwan. So, maybe we can chat a bit about why you are still in the industry and you did make it.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely love those stats that you share. I'm a big stats guy. And that 2-year dropout or 1-year dropout rate is just ridiculously high. I think for all those reasons that you kind of shared with barriers and people really not understanding why they got into the industry. I think that's a big reason on why people fail in that first year. But then, even the 5-year dropout rate being at like 80-90% is just a very clear indication that people are getting into real estate for the wrong reasons, not making it, and then realizing they have to transition into something else. So I think those stats just paint that image super clearly. But for myself, I would say that my background in real estate before that was in telecom sales, actually. So I did telecom sales for about 5 years leading up to my career in real estate. I know we mentioned it. I also went to U of T for business communication. And I feel like a lot of those skills that I learned, theoretically in school and then in practice with sales in the telecom world transferred really, really well into the real estate environment. And I feel like, this is always a topic for people, but I feel like in the early years, people are very much divided into salespeople and what I like to call order takers in real estate. I know we've kind of spoken about those two terms before where, when you start your real estate journey, I feel like there's kind of 2 brackets you can kind of fall into. One is if you're trying to explore what we call your sphere of influence, people around you who might be transacting, thinking about buying a home and all those types of things. And then, or strangers that you're trying to convert and work and all those types of things. So for myself,
which both can be scary.
Both can be scary for sure.
A lot of people, when they start out, have a very hard time calling people they know. You were one of those.
I am still,
over a stranger, right? 100%. So why do you think it is so hard for people to reach out, like fresh new agents, to do that initial call or message? Their sphere, right? Or the people that they know.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a really good question. And it's funny because a lot of different agents, they have different strength, let's say, on maybe they are okay speaking to their, close sphere like that, and they don't like talking to strangers. Or you could be like me who, you'd rather talk to strangers rather than, talk to, people in your sphere. And I'm trying to think back to when I first started, and because I know that was a big, exercise we were doing about reaching out to your sphere. And I want to say it's probably because you have a bit of maybe, let's say, imposter syndrome in the beginning, where you're like, like you said, you wrote a few exams, got a website, and now you're a real estate agent, right? But you haven't actually done real estate.
Yeah. I also think it's because like, I feel like there's so many realtors out there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like these people definitely get pitched like, the whole, that message we all see on LinkedIn, right? Like, I got my real estate license now and, do you need any help? Like, right. So maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people might not want to, feel confident to compete against other agents. You know what I mean? They're like, I just started, I'm fresh. Why would they choose me over, someone else? I think that's like a very big barrier, huge mindset, which is probably, I would say, like a big part of why people succeed in general in life. But especially in real estate in those first few years, it's going to be that mindset aspect. But yeah, for myself, I'd probably say, maybe a little bit of mindset that took a little bit of time to shift. And I would say that shift took time with confidence, being in the industry, being, having great mentors, being on a team, for example, to kind of see, what is what. That kind of gives you that confidence to reach out to, strangers and your SOI and say, I am competent to help you, with this next step that you're trying to take. And I think it's very hard to do that, to have that in your first year. But I know you did though, and when you first started.
Yeah, I would say I was like a textbook. I remember my good friend Martin, if you're watching, hey. But he would always say to me, he's a realtor as well. He's like, wow, Cynthia, like you are always doing like all the things that they say to do, like write the Christmas cards, prospect,
start a
follow
podcast
up with people, right? So he was just like, you're doing it all, like, all the things that all the coaches and trainers tell you to do. And I was definitely doing it all. And I mean, obviously, and consistency, showing up every day. I think that's the most important thing to do in order to be successful in real estate is the small things, which are the hardest.
Yeah.
And, doing all of those things over time led me to where obviously I started the team and decided to, branch out and not just work solo, which you always say, like, you don't know how do agents do it by themselves? Because you see there's so much involved, right? So, but that being said, like you mentioned joining a team, right? And I know how much you believe in the team, model, and you always say how grateful you are for the team. So let's say as a new agent, like, imagine you hadn't joined the team. How do you think things would have turned out for you?
Yeah, bad for the record. I just want to say for the record, probably very, very bad. But no, I think, the team, any new agent who kind of reaches out to me and says, Dakwan, you've gone to the industry recently, you're doing really well, like all the types of things, where should I start? And I think that question is so loaded and tough to answer because it's so good. Like, where do you start? You just got your license fresh out of school. Maybe you still have another job. You're trying to, figure out what's going on. And maybe for me, like, if people don't have sales experience or background, I know we've said this before, and maybe other people have different views on it, but if you don't have any sales background, like, I feel like this job's extremely, extremely hard. You know what I mean?
Well, it just makes it 10 times harder to be successful if you don't have that background. But that being said, I did not have that background.
I know.
My background, I mean, I'd say maybe my grandma, like we're talking about, back in the day, in my lineage, my grandmother did have a store. My mom tells me about that they were selling all kinds of like produce and right. So maybe somewhere like in my genetics, it's like being a salesperson somewhere dormant.
Yeah.
And I awoken that whole talent. But truthfully, like I really didn't work much in sales, right? Like my background, of course, was law enforcement, right?
I was going to say, that's the next best thing, I would say, next to sales.
I would have to agree with you, right? Because asking questions in real estate is one of the most important things, right? Like asking the hard questions up front.
Yes.
So other than sales, I think that sort of background is also
Important. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
your background story, I think, is so interesting, honestly, with all the stories you've told me when you did work in law enforcement, like those types of questions that you were, having to ask people.
Yes. And I was thinking about this last night because we've been chatting about asking hard questions where I would have to look at someone in the face and ask them, when is the last time you had a bowel movement? So when you've asked hard questions like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it becomes easier to ask, are you working with an agent?
Really?
You know what I mean? It's just a lesser.
Can you imagine yourself asking that to someone, a stranger?
I can't imagine me asking that. Never mind, like someone asking me that. That's also a bigger shocker there. So yeah, if you don't have sales experience, start asking people when they went to the bathroom.
Yeah,
you'll be good in the industry.
Yeah, So anyone coming from law enforcement, I feel like positions of authority, you do great also in this. Working with people, reading people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of these are the challenges because sure, you can learn all the theory, know the forms, but then if you lack that like emotional intelligence,
mm-hmm.
how to talk to people, because they say like half of it is knowing what to say, but you have to also say it to the right people. Like there's just all these things.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And that's why the sales aspect of the law enforcement background, it teaches you those, almost softer skills that you need to, deal with people, deal with the public, have those types of conversations. And, when I'm speaking to people who are newer to the industry and I'm like, I just don't know if you have that ability. And I think that's really, really hard to teach. Like you said, I can teach you the systems, marketing, advertising, the forms, like negotiations, all that stuff. But it's like, if you're not able to carry a conversation or if you're nervous to have a conversation with someone, then it's like, I think this industry is going to be really, really hard for you. But I mean, I hope people prove me wrong and see if they can work through that. But having that sales background, I think changes everything and increases your success in that first 2-year kind of period. And I know with your original question to me, I would say that having those soft skills developed thoroughly through my university
because
career.
You told me at your old job, Bell.
Yeah.
People would like yell at you, like you took some really tough, you were in some situations, right?
Yeah, no, I'm 100%. Yeah, definitely. Everyone who lives in Canada, they probably had some experience with telecom, whether it's Rogers or Bell, where it was, good or bad, essentially. But when I worked in sales, I was more or less the front lines, for the company. So the good, the bad, the ugly, I saw it all.
I was honestly shocked to learn that at Bell, like a retail store in a mall that you said people would be like quite irate.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. We've had to call like the security a few times, like law enforcement.
To me, that's shocking. Like it's one thing if, I'm searching your bags at the airport and you're not happy.
Yeah.
But like, we're talking about like cell phones.
Physical. People getting physical, wanting to get physical, all those types of things. So going through that, then you're like, oh, maybe door knocking is not that hard. You know what I mean? After I've gone through that, I'm just like, oh, maybe picking up the phones, calling people, speaking to family about real estate, it's a lot easier to do. But for either situations, you got to have thick skin. And I feel like people, like we were saying before, they see the luxury on TV, the lavishness, they don't see the hard work, the determination, the tough conversations. And then when they're in it, they're like, oh, this is actually not for me. I'm actually not like interested in doing this anymore. So I think all those things tied into it sounds like both of our successes, early on in that additional first phase. And I think that moving to, those agents in the 5-year bracket or
the ones that actually make it.
The ones that actually make it. I think we have different. I know we have different definitions of agents who make it, but yes, the ones who make it and don't, get a new job and they continue with it. I feel like, they definitely have a different type of issues, run into different type of issues than those agents, in that first year,
And sorry, let's define what making it means, right? So your average agent, how many transactions are they doing? So 77,000 licensed agents.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on that. The 77,000, like we have more agents per capita than like New York,
right?
For example, which is just, absolutely shocking to see. I think the stat last time I saw it, it was like there's like 1 in 80, like 85 people in like Ontario or our real estate agent.
Ontario?
No, the province of Ontario. Are an agent, which is just, super, super shocking. I
wouldn't be surprised if there's some in Lake Ontario as
Honestly, if there's deals there, we'll go for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I think based on the stats that we saw in 2022, it was like more than half of all the agents licensed did 1 or 0 deals. Yeah. Which is just
90% of the business is done by 10% of the realtors.
Yeah.
So in my books, making it, I mean, 10 deals a year if you're like by yourself full time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's not bad.
Yeah. I think to be in
for today's standards and numbers.
I agree. I think in today's standards and numbers, I think to be in the 1% was like 12 deals. I think 12 deals a year that put you into the 1% bracket.
I think it's more than that.
Yeah, I know there was kind of a bit of a wider range. Maybe this year's different type of thing. But the point is that majority of agents aren't doing a lot of deals. And even that other stat you brought up of the 90-10, I heard a lot of people are talking about it's getting a lot closer to like 95.
Yeah, now it is for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's crazy to think like, you know, when I started out in 2010, like from 2010 to like 2016, I was doing between like 20 and 40 transactions by myself.
No assistant, nothing.
I like to send the team pictures. I had like a house chart and stuff. No assistant on my own. And I was just too busy like to even know what was going on. Like I would just work. But obviously that's why I'm here today, right, with the team and all of this. But yeah, it's just nuts when you look at the transactions. And I think there are a lot of solo agents that might think they're doing this full time and have like a good business, but they're not really looking at the numbers, right? Like, what does it actually cost you to take the listings, to work with the buyers? Like those numbers, which you love numbers. So maybe we can chat a bit about that.
No. And I think that really, points out the difference in problems that, or challenges, I should say, that you face at that 1 to 5 year mark. Because at the beginning, you have no overhead. You're just figuring out what's going on. You know, you're just getting your feet wet. Shooting from the hips, exactly. And then you get to that 5 year mark and you're like, okay, wait, you know, I have a steady flow of business. You know, maybe I don't want to be working 90-hour weeks anymore, you know, trying to figure out, you know, what's kind of going on. So how do I solve some of these problems? And then you get into the expenses, you know, the real expenses of running a business, running a team, you know, even being solo. And
like hiring an admin.
Not
cheap.
Yeah.
The first one I hired was part-time, but then let's say full-time back when 2016, you had to pay someone at least, let's say 40, 35 even. I think it was 35 actually.
Yeah. And even now, if you wanted to, you know, have that, a luxury, honestly, of having an assistant, I know those salaries, you know, do range now. But it's a major key for all the top producing agents I know to have that extra assistance where, you know, you have someone there to help you with the listings and, you know, everything in between. But I feel like the general public, they don't really understand how expensive it is to be producing at that level. I think they just see like the flashiness. They hear the numbers. Selling Sunset says, oh, they're making $1 million. They're making $200,000 from all this deal. But you know, they don't really see the expenses that kind of come from it. And I think that might be, and, you know, someone like yourself who is experienced, you probably will have some more to say about this, but, you know, what kind of issues do you think people have at that 5 year mark when it comes to how much of the expenses cost, like how to manage them, like where to allocate funds? You know what I mean? Like,
I honestly think a lot of agents, if they're solo and they're at the 5 year mark, like most of them don't have admins.
Really?
I think it's when you decide you want to build a team, right? Like, where you get an office space, right? I mean, you might have like an admin overseas virtually, and a lot of people go that route too. But if you want to have like a physical office, a team, and basically have staff, right? Like now the expenses start to really pile on, right? And I mean, there's the truth in the industry is like the more money you're making, the larger your team, the profit margin gets smaller and smaller, right? So like some big teams, like the owners maybe only take 10, 15% of profit. So it's almost like you got to find that sweet spot and then, you know, decide like, what do you want to do at that 5 year mark? Do you want to maybe join a team that has some of this leverage, systems, all that stuff already built out?
Yeah.
Or do you want to continue on like a lone ranger, right? And sort of be really running lean.
Yeah. And you know what? That's really, really, really well said because, you know, I think there's so many ways to be successful in the industry. And, you know, a lot of people that I've even spoken to who like being solo or don't like being solo or they're new, they're like, oh, Dakwan, you know, you seem like you're doing well, like all this type of stuff, you know, would you ever start your own team? You know, do you like being on a team? All those types of things. And hearing you say all that stuff, I'm like, I'm happy that I just have to sell real estate. You know, I don't have to do all the high level things that you're talking about and managing a team. And, you know, obviously there's, you know, costs or, you know, splits that people talk about with teams. But it's like, if you're with the right team, all of that stuff is worth it. All of that stuff is worth it, right? So I feel like I said, hearing you kind of say that, I really like for everyone listening that, you know, it's okay to be on a team. It's okay to like have that assistance and, just want to sell the real estate.
Trust me, it is much easier to just sell real estate than run a team. Much easier. So yeah, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. And I hope that, for everyone listening, they do have that kind of those major takeaways that we kind of spoke about, that we ended it with, about being on a team, not being on a team. And really, if you are early in your career as a real estate agent or thinking about it, really ask yourself, is this the lifestyle you want? Do you have kind of those soft skills? Are you ready for those harder conversations before jumping into it? I don't know if you have any other takeaways.
Yeah, and do you actually know what you're doing? And I'm not saying fake it till you make it, which is a thing, but maybe you should join a team or find a mentor, especially in the beginning, right? Like there's just so much to learn. The learning curve is crazy. And that's why the success rate is so low.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dakwan. It's always so fun chatting with you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
Thanks for having me. I'm sure I'll be back at some point.
Definitely. Thank you for watching the Beyond the Sale podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and anywhere you listen to your podcast.